For today's video, I am so excited to say that we have the best photos of John Mayer's 2025 festival touring pedalboard that we could pretty much ask for. Photos that I definitely did not expect to see, especially after the Palm Tree Music Festival, but hey, here we are. I'm certainly not complaining. We're going to go over the pedalboard thanks to these photos in really amazing detail, some changes to the board as well, and the rack unit too, and some interesting things that are going on with the rack unit at this point in time, at least in John's rig. So I'm so excited to go over all of this for you guys today. Now, before we dive into it, I have to give just a massive shout out to my friend Alejandro, who's John Mayer Gear on Instagram. You guys all know who he is by now. He just messaged me earlier today being like, hey, you want to freak out? And then sent these shots over to me, which, him and I were having a good laugh at, the fact that we both didn't expect to see these, and just amazing that to have friends in the community. Alejandro is someone who's done so much for the John Mayer gear space, to be able to collaborate on things, and just for him to be like, hey, I'm going to be making a post about this. Here you go. Here's the photo, so you can kind of make one in a timely manner as well, make a video about everything, send them over to me in advance, which I always really appreciate collaborating on things with them. And if you guys want to maybe see him and I do like a live stream on the channel or something, hang out and just chat with you guys, answer some questions about John's gear and things like that, we could probably see if we could tee up something like that. Him and I have done a couple of podcast episodes a few years ago now. Time just flies like crazy. So maybe it could be a lot of fun to have him on the channel and do like a live stream or something like that. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, let me know, and I can see if I can get John Mayer Gear himself on the channel to just do like a live stream for an hour or two, something like that. I think it would be fun. But let's dive into these shots here now. The first one is the pedalboard, and you even see John's faded black tee satin prototype Silver Sky on the stand there. Obviously, these shots were taken well in advance of the crowd and everyone getting there. And we're just going to dive right on into the pedalboard here and talk about a few things. So starting off, we have the Keeley True Bypass Looper for the Psych Loop, which has the Shinai Companion psychedelic amplifier machine in it for the I Just Feel Like Fuzz tone. This should be first in the chain. You can even see in the input jack, it's got a really long cable running into it, just indicating, okay, has to be first in the chain for that fuzz tone. With the way buffers work and everything like that, if you're trying to do that, I Just Feel Like tone, do the super fuzz circuit first and then stack like the TS10 on top of it to kind of smooth things out a little bit as well. That'll get you a lot closer to it than placing it later on in the chain. We follow through then with the TC Electronics Polytune 3, and then a change to John's pedalboard that I definitely would not have expected. If you had to tell me, okay, give your best guess as to what pedal type, even effect type, John would swap something out for on this festival tour and change things up with, wah probably would have been last on my list. But we have a Vox wah that's been added to the pedalboard, and from everything it looks like the real McCoy limited edition all chrome wah that John is using, just based on the fact that John's pedals all chrome, and this is the only one that Vox makes that really lines up with that exact schematic. Now, what's interesting is that John actually had switched this pedal for the Pilgrimage Festival. The XW1 Exotic Wah pedal was actually swapped to this Vox one for that festival. John had posted to his Instagram a photo of him from the festival, and then you could actually see the board, and you could barely make out the words Vox on there, and Alejandro and I were messaging back and forth laughing. Of course, after we make our post, I make my video, John then posts a better shot of the board than we had up until that point, and then you can actually see, oh, something had changed. Now, initially when I saw it was a Vox wah for the Pilgrimage Festival, I thought maybe like the Exotic failed on him or something like that, and it was just a backup for that one show. But a week later now, to see John still using it, I definitely think it's more of a choice that he's experimenting maybe with something that's a bit more vintage sounding, because at this point he could have easily have gotten another XW1 wah pedal if that's one he really wanted to have on the pedalboard. So maybe he's just experimenting with his wah sound at this point. Beliefs solo, he's used wah a little bit more in recent years as well, so maybe it's something we're seeing him just add in, and who knows, maybe this Vox wah will get replaced with something else, and then he'll have, just a couple of different pedals he tests out. Maybe he'll stick with this one, or maybe he goes back to old reliable, the XW1, and that's just what he ends up using instead, but only time will tell. But it's really cool just to see John experimenting with a different wah pedal, something though I never would have guessed would be kind of the one we see him change up, especially mid kind of this little mini festival run that he's doing. You know, I definitely think this pedal board is going to be the primary foundation for what we should expect for the next tour, the next album, unless, you know, there are songs that he starts performing that require very specific sounds or effects. But I think the fundamentals, the core of this pedal board will probably be very similar to what we can expect to see 2026, hopefully on tour. 2027, I'd be willing to bet, is a guarantee. Now, moving on, we have the Origin Effects slide rig, followed by the Ibanez TS10, the Exotic Super Clean, the JHS pedals box set later, the Klon Centaur, the 10 Years is a Decade in all white, and the Marshall Bluesbreaker Mark I completing that front row. Now, the Marshall Bluesbreaker, I personally believe it's an original vintage Mark I that John is using. He just took one out that he had with him and just brought it in. The timing of when we first saw John using the Bluesbreaker again with Dead & Company was certainly right around the time that Marshall released the reissue, but it's John. I just feel like he could have a vintage unit. I've never totally subscribed to the theory that it's a modern reissue, but it's certainly possible until we get a really clear shot of the pedal to know if it's really beat up and aged or if it looks just brand new. It's going to be pretty difficult to tell. One thing as well with the Bluesbreaker before we move on is just, it's worth noting because the shot is at least very clear enough to see the settings. The gain is, you know, like 1 o'clock, but then you have the tone, which is basically maxed, and then you have the volume as well, which is pretty high up there. It's at like, you know, 430, you know, on the knob there. It's pretty interesting noting John's settings, and that's kind of the funny thing with these Mark I Bluesbreakers is they don't have a lot of headroom. They don't actually have a lot to give out of them, so you have to have the settings pretty cranked in order to actually get just, you know, a lot out of the pedal. So definitely within the context of even John's old rig, these settings do make a lot of sense, which leads me into a little bit of a theory that I have in regards to how John is using the Bluesbreaker, but I'm saving that for a tone breakdown of Gravity from Palm Tree Festival, because I think it's one of the best tones we've heard, especially for Gravity, in a long time. And there's a theory I have with the Bluesbreaker that I think John might be doing, and the settings do line up with that as well, but I'll save that for another video. Moving on now to the second row, we see that the Boss OC3 is on the board, but it actually has a label on it that says Qtron, confirming that the OC3 is actually in the effects loop of the Qtron Plus, which is really amazing to actually see. It's just wild that the shot is so clear that we can actually tell, you know, what it is. It's crazy. So of course the next pedal is Electro Harmonix Qtron Plus, followed by a second Exotic Super Clean. Then we have the Boss CE2. The settings on that look to be about, you know, what you'd expect for like Last Train Home, the kind of sob rock chorusy tone, followed by the JHS pedals Artificial Blonde, then the Way Huge Octopus Mark II version, this being kind of the first mainline touring pedal board besides the 2017 Search for Everything World Tour, where John's actually relied on the Mark II versus the Mark I for his full band performances, so just kind of interesting to note. Then we have the Strymon Flint completing that second row. Moving up to the third row, we have the Boss TU3 for the acoustic tuner, just what we're used to seeing John use for that acoustic tuner at this point. Then we have the 29 pedals Una, followed by the Korg STD 3000 PDL version. I'm absolutely in love with this delay, especially for like the edge stuff. I've been working on learning the Fly by U2, especially the solo. I need a Korg A3 to really do it properly, but it's so cool sounding. The things you can do with the STD 3000, I absolutely love it, especially for the edge thing. It sounds so great. You can see that there is just some tape that they've actually placed across the pedal just to make it a little bit clearer as to kind of what's going on. You have the tap, the up arrow, then you have A and B. So it just makes it a little bit easier for John to actually see. And because the tape is on there, I kind of theorize that John is actually switching between presets for certain songs, which is maybe why he's using the STD 3000, so that he actually just has more options for different delay sounds and even tones, and just there are adjustments they can make for different songs rather than just having like the Providence chrono delay, for example, kind of set the same, just different tempos for it. And then like the TES kind of thing, the delay 80s thing as well, kind of just set there to do that tape thing. But now he has just the ability to have way different sounds for delays for different songs even. So I kind of think that's what John might be doing with the STD 3000. The next pedal is the Templo Audio Devices Real Deluxe on their Canadian brand. Absolutely love to see it there. And you can kind of make out John's settings too, which is amazing. Then we have the Hammond Leslie G, a Dead & Company pedal that we're seeing now get added onto John's board, kind of in place almost of like the Strymon Lex, maybe to do kind of the rotary thing for John. Maybe for like Love is a Verb, we can hope maybe we'll see John performing that song again. Then we have the New Neighbor Slate, and then the Illumin. Wait a second, we actually have to backtrack here. I'm just blown away by how clear this photo actually is. It's not a New Neighbor Slate, it's actually the New Neighbor Expanse, but it's doing the exact same thing. It's doing the wet reverb algorithm that New Neighbor has for Love on the Weekend. That's what the Expanse is doing. It's just a different pedal that's loaded on, just a newer pedal probably that they programmed for John over the older Slate. The Illumin is there as well. That's for different reverbs for John's solos, just different settings that he would have. You'd see him scroll through just to add in some extra reverb on, mainly kind of for solos. That's what it's doing there. So like with the Lumen, John kind of having a few different presets scrolling through. He's kind of now doing that thing, I believe, with the STD 3000 as well, which is just awesome to see him doing things like that with his pedal board as well. One thing to note too is that there is a radial JR5 remote next to the pedal board. Just trying to zoom in on the JR5 remote. There's no labels actually on the switches from what I can tell, but it could be there to activate things in the rack unit. John kind of had something going on very similar during the Sob Rock era as well, which kind of theorized he might be doing, or even using that to activate the psychedelic amplifier machine fuzz as well. So something we've seen John doing before, but my best guess at this point in time is it's there for effects in the rack unit. There is then a switch for the Benson Amps Tallbird, which is a great point now to transition into talking about John's rack unit, because there is the Tallbird in the rack unit, not in a head shell. It's just kind of rigged into the rack unit there, but really awesome to see that effect actually being used by John, maybe just for some standard spring reverb for the amplifiers and kind of things like that, because it is a real spring reverb unit. And just reading up on the Tallbird Plus tube-driven reverb and tremolo, it's really interesting. The Tallbird Plus is our flagship all-tube-driven spring reverb with classic and harmonic optical tremolo. It's a ground-up original design with the goal of attaining the classic 60s sound, both added functionality and improved noise characteristics. Highlights include independent wet-dry controls. The dry path can push into wide-open console-style distortion. The wet path can slam anything downstream. Size control inspired by the Chimera amps bass knob. It goes from cavernous to vintage tight. Reverb selection, EL84 powered, feeding a spring tank capable of classy shimmer to wild chaos. The tremolo circuit, harmonic or conventional tremolo modes, hand-tuned LDRs, and an ultra-wide sweep via custom 3-pole oscillator, possibly the only tube-powered optically driven harmonic tremolo on the market. That is really cool. And then low noise as well. The gain staging has been carefully implemented for low noise as well there. So really cool to see John actually experimenting with that. And then he has the switch out in front of him too. So could be, again, just additional reverb, maybe harmonic trem he's experimenting with for gravity over the Strymon Flint. Who knows? But this is something new that's really interesting to actually see John using. Now, the pedal drawer above it is something that is very perplexing. There's a bit of a mystery that's going on here. Now, it seems to be the same as to what John was using with Dead & Company at Sphere, but because it was Dead & Company, I chalked it up maybe to him just experimenting with some weird stuff or some weird sounds for Dead & Company, and I just didn't pay a ton of attention to it, if I'm being totally honest. But now that we see it with his actual full band, John performing his own music, my interest is definitely piqued now because, okay, what the heck is going on? So the first pedal in the drawer is the Universal Audio Golden Reverberator. The third pedal is the Exotic X Blender, but the middle one is the very perplexing thing. It's the Keeley Electronics Blues Disorder. What is a blues breaker style overdrive doing in the rack? Is John blending it in some ways, using it along with the reverb somehow to push things along? Like, it makes no sense to me.
It makes no damn sense. Compels me though.
Yeah, it's very interesting. If you guys have any theories, leave them in the comments, but I personally have really no clue. It was there with Dead & Company as well, and that's why I just was kind of like, all right, maybe he's doing something weird. Who knows? But now with his full band. It's like, I just don't get it. In what way could it be being used there? Behind the Blues Disorder, it definitely looks like another Universal Audio pedal, maybe the Dream, as like a backup. Like worst case scenario, the whole rig goes down. He's got that just to run, and then maybe the Blues Disorder is just like a bypass in front of that they can use. That's one thing that, you know, I'm trying to think of things that it could be. That's kind of possibly maybe what's going on. And then behind the Universal Audio Golden Reverberator, my friend the London guitarist actually spotted, and you know, we have the theory that it could be the Effectrode PC2A compressor. Him, Alejandro, and Brian the Tone Geek and I were all kind of chatting obviously before making this video about these shots, and it seemed to be that it could possibly be that, like the holes in the side of the enclosure, you kind of see something like that. I have the shot pretty blown up on the computer here, and it's very hard to tell, but it could possibly be that or something else, but just kind of throwing some things out here, and that's what he kind of spotted and was like, okay, maybe that could be what's going on back there, but hard to tell without actually seeing the shot. But that's just, you know, one theory at this point in time I can see that we have kind of discussed and are talking about, and would be a kind of cool David Gilmour connection as well. He's got a lot of David Gilmour connections between John's rig and David's. Maybe that's a video I'll have to make in collaboration with them. I think it could be pretty cool to kind of discuss, you know, all the gear that David Gilmour has used, and then John using it as well later on, kind of leading to a theory that the London guitarist has always had, where it's like, you know, John's kind of like a secret David Gilmour fan and kind of pays attention to David's rig almost, it looks like. So that could be a really fun video to actually make. So if that's something you guys are curious in me making as well, let me know in the comments down below. But that's kind of it from the main things for the rack there that is kind of worth pointing out. You have a couple of Avalon U5s down there for the acoustic, and then you have the stereo dumblator as well at the very bottom, obviously kind of doing I think something pretty important. I think the dumblator is an overlooked device in John's rig, but maybe more on that in another video. But these shots, absolutely incredible, absolutely wild. Like even in this rack unit shot, you can see John's pedal board actually just up, not even on the floor at this point in time behind the rack unit. You can make out the blues breaker there, the flint, the aluminum. It's so amazing. So massive shout out to Alejandro for sending these over to me in advance to use. And he actually sent me the full like high res shots that he has as well to use. So you can actually like blow it up, at least I can, pretty, you know, greatly, and actually see there's a Qtron sticker on the OC3, which is awesome, and see what, like, you know, like the labels are on the STD 3000. So massive shout out to him, and thanks to him for everything he's done in the John Mayer gear community. You know, certainly on the Mount Rushmore of John Mayer gear fans and people who have done research and everything like that. So like I said, if you guys want to see me collaborate with them, maybe do like a live stream where we just hang out with you guys, answer some questions, talk about kind of our favorite Mayer gear stories or something, who knows? But if that's something you guys want to see, let me know in the comments below, and I'll chat with them and see if we can make something like that happen. But again, just a massive shout out to him for sending these over to me and being so kind and just amazing to be like, hey, here you go. You can make a video on this while I'm kind of preparing my post as well. Really awesome to be able to do this and collaborate with people in the space and just share stories and things like that. So it's very much appreciated. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you on the next one.
Anyway, go ahead and click the subscribe button if you like what you see.